Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're really excited about this webinar today. We've got Stacy with us from the FBI here. She's going to take us through a presentation. There'll be questions, a time for questions at the end. If you want to send them in throughout, or if we have a chance to answer them within, we can do that as well. This webinar is being recorded, and you will get a certificate after the fact proving that you were here. And if you are looking for some CAMS credits, you do get 1 hour credit here, but you'll have to manually submit that certificate to them to get the credit for it. So just remember that. We'll remind you in the follow-up email. But with all that said, we appreciate Stacy being here. We're going to let her get kicked off here.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Stacy Cohen. I'm an intelligence analyst with the FBI. I work out of the Charlotte Division, the Asheville RA, up here in the beautiful mountains of Western North Carolina. A little background on me is I've been with the FBI for almost 25 years. I started out my career in New York City. I was there for about 8 years, went to Atlanta for 6 years, and then I've been here in Asheville for 10. I was first introduced to SARS in 2008 after the housing market bust. I worked strictly mortgage fraud out of the Atlanta division. I did that for 2 years, which Atlanta was, I don't know, was sort of a big area for that mortgage fraud stuff. So I worked that strictly for 2 years before I came here to Asheville. In Asheville, I work all threats. That means I work terrorism, gangs, human trafficking, you name it, I work it. But I brought those skills of looking at SARS to Asheville as a way of generating cases or looking for trends to inform our executive management. So my job is twofold. One of my jobs is to look at information and provide our executive management with information in which they can make decisions. In other words, if I look at SAR data and I see mortgage fraud is going up, then they know they can direct resources towards mortgage fraud. The other part, or the secondary role of my position, is to generate cases for our case agents, or to identify potential cases. So I've also looked at SARS to generate specific cases for some of our case agents. Some of those cases have included human trafficking, drugs, believe it or not, foreign counterintelligence, securities fraud. These are all the things that we look at. So usually my presentation is a bit on the interactive side. I like to ask questions, but I know in this webinar that might be difficult. I will offer opportunity at the end to ask questions. I think there's an option to maybe ask throughout. If I can get to them, I will. And then I also want to let you know that the presentation I'm providing you has 2018 marked on it. I had attempted to update this presentation with more recent information. Unfortunately, our technology is not the best. You would think it would be, but it's not. So I have to use this presentation from 2018. I was unable to update it, but the message will still be the same. But wanted to let you know that the 2018 I know is there, and I attempted to change it, but I can't. So we're going to go ahead and begin. So when you think of the FBI, you think of all the different investigations that we may handle. Specifically with white collar, with regards to SAR reviews, we work the things that you would think we work: corporate fraud, securities fraud, mortgage fraud, public corruption, those types of criminal threats. But there's another side to the FBI outside of the white collar that if you watch the news, you'll see, there's human trafficking, gangs, elder care fraud, believe it or not, we work. More recently, there's been account takeovers and intrusion, and there's been an uptick in child pornography. That's in addition to the obvious priorities of terrorism, international terrorism, and more recently, domestic terrorism. And with you guys, I'm assuming you know sovereign citizens with some of the banking fraudulent documents that they'll sometimes submit to banks. So with the SAR review in mind, you have to look at the changing landscape of what is going on in the news to sort of know what the FBI is going to look at. Like I said, more recently, specifically with the oil, the intrusion, the account takeover, the hacking of the oil industry that caused the gas shortage and all that. That's something that the FBI has taken an interest in. It has become a priority, and I think sometimes SAR data does not reflect the priorities that the FBI is looking at. Of course, you guys have your own priorities. you know, you have your own priorities. You write these reviews not just for the FBI, I understand that, but for the FBI and looking at them, there's a lot of information that we can garner, or that I garner when I look through them. So I just want to show you how I look at SAR data. So this formatting is a little bit different than what I have in front of me, but so I take the SAR data that is pulled in from FinCEN and I like to put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and then I sort of manipulate the data a little bit, and I try to separate it out by the SAR number, the names, occupation. You'll see the occupation listed there. I separate the violation, the subgroup violations. I like to weed out the filing institutions. I also like to code some of the data for the dollar amounts. Now, I know a lot of people, when they think of the FBI looking at SAR data, that we're really interested in the dollar amount. And while that is somewhat true, the FBI is a little bit different in that a lot of the violations that we work, or some of them, don't necessarily include high dollar amounts. Specifically, human trafficking or child pornography don't necessarily deal with high dollar amounts, but those are obviously areas that we want to look at. So with this in mind, you'll see that I separate things out by year, by what's called a resident agency. Our main office in North Carolina is the Charlotte field office, but we have these small satellite offices around North Carolina to include Asheville, Greensboro, Raleigh, Fayetteville, Wilmington. There's several in the state, so I like to look at those as well. So if you look at this Excel spreadsheet, you will see, you know, across the top, how I broke it down so that I can take a big, broad look at what's going on in North Carolina. So looking at data from a few years ago, what I first noticed is I download all the data, and this is unique SARs. Sometimes there are duplicates, so getting rid of the duplicates for a period of from 2014 through 2017, the beginning of 2017, there were 215,000 SARs written in North Carolina. If you look at it, you can obviously see the upward tick in it, but you know, is there an uptick in activity, or is there an uptick in filing? And if there is an uptick in activity, where exactly is that activity coming from? So this is where I start, and then I like to look at all the different violations. You guys are probably very familiar with all this, and if you look, you know, instrument types is what gets the majority of the SARs, or what they're tagged to. The top several instrument types, fraud, money laundering, documentation, and structuring, tends to be the catch-all that we find or I find when I'm looking through SARs. There are, if you look at the bottom, you can see securities fraud. There was only 6 written in the state in a, you know, over 3-year period, which really isn't very accurate. So sometimes when SARs are written, they seem to be tagged to what's the easiest violation that you guys can find, like money laundering or fraud. Sometimes that's helpful, sometimes that's not helpful. If you look at the other suspicious activity, there's over 2,000 written there, and there's like 29 written with no identification whatsoever. Okay, so this looks at the dollar amounts with the 215,000 SARs in mind. You can see the dollar amounts. So the mass majority of SARs that we look at are under 250,000. I would have loved to have included all the SARs that are below like 10,000, just so that you could see the breakdown of it, because the majority of people assume we look at the highest dollar amounts. You can see the small percentages of that, and that the mass majority really is below 250,000, which, you know, sometimes people think that they're overlooked, and I think sometimes they might be, unless we get multiple SARs written to the same name. You know, in Atlanta, there were people conducting mortgage fraud who maybe had 10 different SARs, each of them for $100,000, which, you know, by themselves we wouldn't look at, but the totality of the activity was something we were definitely interested in. So I wanted to look at all the SARs and see if I could figure out where the increase was coming from. Was it a real increase, or was it just an increase in criminal activity, or was it an increase in filing? So here's just a quick little snapshot of what I looked at. I kind of eliminated some of the group violations just to make the chart look a little nicer. But if you look, you can see fraud, money laundering, and instrument types got the majority of SARs written, you know, got the violation tag to that. You can also look at if you look at this chart, and I would ask you, what do you see? What do you see that sort of stands out? So with fraud, money laundering, and instrument types, you see that there's an increase. With instrument types, you see there's a large increase in 2016. That is definitely different than the other violations. You can also see like identification theft or trying to see what these other ones are. You can see that they're kind of level, which is interesting because we have an increase in the drafting of SARs for the last couple years. So I'm going to drill down a little bit so that I can look at these violations a little bit closer along with their like sub violations. So here I have fraud, money laundering, and instrument types all broken down. And then I wanted to look specifically at the sub violations. Where is this increase coming from? Is there an area that the FBI needs to be specifically interested in? So if you look at this chart, you can also see that, for fraud, general fraud, that there's an increase in business loan fraud. Check fraud seems to be kind of level, and consumer fraud seems to be going down. Mass marketing is non-existent. If you go over to money laundering, you can see suspicious conditions of funds, I think, is increasing, but source of funds, this might be mixed up a little bit, but you can just see where it increases and what areas are not increasing with regards to how the SARs were filed. Now, the interesting area is the instrument types. You can check and see that the fund transfers, the C sub-violation, has the most significant increase. And so now what I would ask myself is this the increase that we're seeing for the total number of SARs? What is causing this increase specifically? You look over at the U.S. currency, which is the last little chart there, and you can see that's going down. So we know that instrument types, fund transfers is where there's an increase within North Carolina for SARs. So I look at fraud violations. I break it down a little bit more just to go back to fraud. You can see this, the increase uptick for the last few years. Then I break it down by the subgroup violation or the sub-violation, and you can kind of take a look at this. And again, normally I would see, what do you see? You can see that check fraud, it looks like it's probably going down, or consumer loan fraud, which is E, is going down. But some of the other areas is going up. You can also see the sub-violation of Z is going up, which is interesting because that's just other, and sometimes I think that gets it kind of hides the activity by check marking other. I can't really tell what's happening. So we're going to look at the consumer loan fraud, and sort of the same thing. You can see it's been pretty steady. The interesting thing with mortgage fraud is this is obviously after 2010. Let's go to this one. I'm sorry, mortgage fraud. You can see it going down. Now, you would ask yourself, why is it going down? Is there less mortgage fraud, or is there less interest in mortgage fraud? After the 2008 bust, banks were really good at preventing additional mortgage fraud from happening. There was a greater interest in investigative techniques to stop mortgage fraud. So I think this indicates the decrease in mortgage fraud within North Carolina. Probably also a decrease in interest in filings. So here's money laundering. There were 43,000 SARs that were tagged with money laundering as their primary violation. You can kind of see how that's going. I do want to caveat that for like 2017, I just looked at the first couple months when I wrote this. So that last number is just the beginning months, and I believe probably continued the trend of increased numbers. Okay, so we're going to break down money laundering a little bit more, and we can see that suspicious condition of funds is going up. And then the other areas of like beneficiaries and whatnot seem to be sort of level. So if you have an increase in the filing of SARs, but some groups are sort of level, you can kind of hypothesize that the activity in those areas is decreasing. Now, this is the area that was of most interest. This was the instrument types. This is the big increase that we see that sort of was an anomaly when looking at the charts. You can see that the increase is from fund transfers. If you see in 2016, there was a huge increase in the filing of SARs related to instrument types with the sub-violation of fund transfers. If you look at money orders, they seem to be level, sort of level, a level trend there. Same with check fraud or US currency. So then I would ask myself, why is there an increase in the instrument types related to fund transfers? When you look at this, sometimes you might think, okay, is fund transfers, is there something related to terrorism? What type of criminal activity uses fund transfers? So I try to drill down a little bit. And at this point is when, if you remember back to the original Excel spreadsheet, I break things down by filing institutions. Now, the organization that was responsible for the increase in SAR filings, I removed their name because technically I'm not supposed to have it on here. But if you look, there was one filing institution that was responsible for all of the filings or the filing increase in fund transfers within SARs, with SARs that were written for instrument types with fund transfers. And it was just one. So then then you have to consider, okay, why is this one institution filing all these SARs related to suspicious fund transfers? And the way I would look at that is, if you think back to the original Excel spreadsheets, I broke things down by the various offices within North Carolina. We have the Charlotte main office, and we have all the satellite or smaller offices such as Asheville, Wilmington, Raleigh, Fayetteville, Greensboro. There's several. And so for me to see if there's an area of interest, maybe these SARs are coming from one particular area, maybe they're coming from Raleigh. What do we have going on in Raleigh? So this is the grocery, by the way, this is the grocery chain and the filing of SARs. And you can see that in 2014, they had 5,000 SARs, and by 2016, they had 32,000 SARs related to instrument types, suspicious fund transfers. So here's when I look at all of our offices throughout the state. And what I see here, what I would normally ask is, what do you see? Is that you see that the increase is across the board. Each of the smaller offices see the exact same increase. Now, what would that, lend yourself, what would you think about that if you saw this? Do you think that there's criminal activity going across the state, or do you think it might be something with regards to the institution and how they're filing SARs? Now, what this allowed me to do was make the recommendation to our executive management regarding the one specific grocery store chain that was filing all these SARs, and they were able to do some outreach with this organization and found out it was just the way they were filing SARs. However, the implications would be that if there were suspicious activity, say in Raleigh, related to terrorism and the transfer of money going out of one particular store, this is how I would have found it. So we go from the executive management, and we like to look at individual cases or identify, switch from looking at the big picture to identifying specific cases for the agents. And we go back to that original page, and we really are interested in a lot more than just the white collar crime. So some of the things that I look at here, and one of the most important things I look at, and unfortunately this chart, I was not able to update it to really highlight it, is the occupation that is written on the SARs. So if I were to look at, if I wanted to look at human trafficking, what would be an occupation that I might look at? I might want to sort through and find Asian spas or nail salons or housekeepers or, those hotels. That's where we see human trafficking. Farmers, some of the agricultural segments of North Carolina, the Christmas tree farms. So if I were to look at the individual SARs, or I'm looking for an individual case while looking at SARs, I would be very interested in the occupation written on the SARs. So for gangs, I might look at the casino filings. I might be interested in where they're filed at. For account takeovers, I would probably do a text search and look at the details that you guys write in your SARs. Something in the bureau that we are often told when we're writing something to sort of catch the attention of like our executive management or a case agent is to what we call bluff the bottom line up front. So if you're writing a SAR, it is really important to put the most important information at the top of the SAR. Sometimes the SARs can get quite lengthy, and honestly, we get lost in the details. So it's really important to put at the top and say, I think this is human trafficking, X, Y, and Z, or put those catchphrases. right now account takeovers are a big deal. Put account takeover into the detail section of your SAR. Now I understand that the FBI is very different than banking institutions, and the training is different, but it would probably benefit to be aware of what the FBI is investigating or what some trends are with regards to like account takeovers, like what to look for account takeovers, what to look for human trafficking. Some SARs that I went through looking for human trafficking, I found indicators in the details that would suggest human trafficking, but human trafficking wasn't marked on the SAR. So generally text searches and the occupation, I can't stress that enough, is how I think about individual cases. Now, when I do this SAR review and I look at the subgroups, I wanted to highlight other, because in the world of SAR review within the FBI, other makes it very difficult to know what I'm looking at. So I always try to suggest not check marking other if you can help it, and try to really drill down on what you think is happening and get as close as you can with the violation and the sub-violation, and to put the bottom line up front in your SAR. Okay, so I'm just going to go over the areas of interest for me. I mean, dollar amount for white collar crimes is important. We do look at dollar amount, but for all those criminal violations that the FBI is interested in, the areas that I look at are occupation. I can't stress that enough. Of the 215,000 SARs, only 62,000 had occupations listed. So there's a big gap there. And I would say if I were to highlight anything, that would be the best area to get, bang for your buck, so to speak, and to get rid of check marking other. There were 14,000 of those. We do look at multiple SAR or CTR violations, and then we're always interested in the filing institutions. Usually Bank of America, Wells Fargo, the big banks have the most, but once in a while we get a filing institution that files a lot of SARs, and that helps us to identify an area where there might be criminal activity, such as the food chain. Now, in the case that I provided you, there was no criminal activity, but you could, hypothesize how we would have found criminal activity had there been any. So bottom line up front in your SAR details, occupation, and drill down on your violations. And so that's actually the end of my presentation. It kind of went by quick, but I hope that there might be some questions.
Well, Stacy, I have a question.
Sure.
While we're waiting to see if anybody else does. In regards to if we feel like something is really important for you guys to see, but we're afraid that it might get lost, in the whole fence and the translation of everything, is there a way that we can reach out directly to the FBI?
Yes, you can call the whatever your field office is, you can call the FBI directly, and it probably wouldn't hurt to figure out how to liaison if they're, or inquire about SAR review boards or SAR review teams, or ask them how you can provide training to make those connections and network with FBI personnel. Even if you don't have those connections, you can always call the local FBI, but you need to have the bottom line up front. You need to be able to say, I think this is, there's this really funny money going on. I think it's terrorism, or I think it's human trafficking. Otherwise, it might get lost in the mix. If you can make those connections and network with FBI employees, and they know you're not going to call them over something the Bureau's not interested in, they're more apt to listen to you. And they will listen to you if it's a good case, if it's good information.
No matter the dollar amount?
No matter the dollar amount. I mean, with white collar crime, each office does have a threshold for opening a case. In Atlanta, during the mortgage fraud bust, I think our threshold was $1 million loss before we could even consider opening a case. For criminal violations, there's no dollar amount. Elder care fraud, I've looked at human trafficking, elder care fraud, where there was $0 amount involved.
Interesting. So it looks like there's a question about, have you seen an uptick in SAR filings related to PPP?
Yes, I wrote a product last year on the PPP program. It's something the Bureau probably hasn't prioritized at this point because we have so much going on, but I do think that in the future we will be looking at PPP fraud, and there has been some in North Carolina. I've definitely seen an uptick. I also see the question about cannabis. We've definitely seen an increase in that as well. Some of the SAR filings that we've seen are related to possibly importing of drugs from the West Coast to here for the purpose of cannabis, or the health products or whatever come from that. So we've seen an uptick in that. We've also seen an uptick in Bitcoin currency, which I'm not quite sure how to handle that. I'm not a cyber person, but I think the use of cryptocurrency lends itself to hiding activity. Like in my mind, I would think that would be like child pornography or something along those lines. We do look up the cannabis specifically. I see the secondary question there. Anything specific or tips? Specifically, we've seen it related to the hemp farms, and I did say about bringing marijuana from elsewhere around the country into the area. I've seen where some banks have written that the money smells like marijuana. You know, I don't know that I have any tips for that other than just to file them. We are looking at them. I know I've looked at them. Specifically related to like the money laundering part of it, and just getting drugs in here to help. North Carolina, from my understanding, isn't the best area to grow some of this stuff, so sometimes it gets imported from elsewhere, and that's the illegal part of it.
Interesting. So,
Sorry.
It's okay. So banks and financial institutions in general are required to file reoccurring SARs on cannabis-related businesses, irregardless of whether their transactions are legal within the state.
Okay.
Or not. Do you guys even bother to look at the ones that are listed as a non-priority SAR?
Yes, yes, I look at all SARs that are filed and I sort them by the areas that I showed you. You know, I do sort them by dollar amount, I do sort them by occupation, and I sort them by the threat violation that you guys tag to it. I'm saying threat violation, but I think you guys call it group violation.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I sort it that way, and then I do the free text searches through there. But no, it doesn't matter. It really depends on what we have going on and what a priority is for the FBI. Like recently, we've had all the increase in domestic terrorism. So there's been an increase in looking for SARs related to those, which are really hard to find. So those we would be free text searches looking for guns, or some people in SARs have written that when some investigators, when they write their SAR, they really do a lot of research on the person that they're looking at, and they'll include things like, this person looks like they belong to this group. That is great information. That is great. Or websites that, well, sometimes the websites where they find information on that individual. I'm trying to think of some other things that we've seen in SARs that have been very helpful.
So listing those websites that you found information on in your narrative is helpful?
I would say so, yes, definitely.
Okay.
Because then it would stop me from having to really spend a lot of time looking. So it'll, oh, look, I can go look this up very quickly. You know, instead of me saying, let me put this on the back burner because I don't have time to do that amount of research. So putting information that you find into the SAR, bottom line up front, this is what's going on, suspicious money laundering, I believe it's related to terrorism, or I believe it's related to gangs, and then the details. So if it catches our attention, then we'll continue to read the details. And any evidence you have, websites or what have you, put that in the details. You know, occupation too. I keep saying that because of all the things in whenever I've done a SAR review, that's been the most frustrating, because there's just, to know, if you see a public official's name, then you know you're looking at maybe public corruption. You see a healthcare employee associated with elder care fraud, you need to be a little more concerned than if it's the son of the individual. You know, it might be somebody taking advantage of multiple people in a nursing home. things like the spas with regards to human trafficking, or I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. The developers, when mortgage fraud was happening, those private developers were of interest. Investment fraud, also again, privately owned investment firms. So those are the things. I mean, occupation to me is the biggest missing key when I look at a SAR. That's what I want to know. I want to know where they work. And sometimes it takes us a while to figure it out on our own. So if you guys know what the occupation is, put it there, because it really is very helpful.
That's good. So what about attaching a document to a SAR filing? So, we have the ability to maybe put transaction history or any of that kind as an attachment to a SAR. Is that helpful at all?
So the way I get the information, I do not get those attachments. I'll be honest, I don't know that we could get those attachments because technically we have to file a subpoena for them. So I would say if there's something that really stands out, you could probably write it in the SAR, but I don't think we could do the attachments.
Okay.
And I see there's a question here, the retracting of a SAR. The only thing I can think of, and we have seen this, is when an additional follow-up SAR has been written. So when I do the name match, if I do a name match and there's multiple SARs to a person's name, I will read all the SARs, and sometimes it will say, this is what was found, and that would be a way. But I almost feel like that's probably more work than you guys need to do. I don't want to tell you not to do that, but unless it's a big SAR, unless you're like, oh my gosh, this is $1 million SAR, and then later on you find out, oh, no, it really is okay. Then do a follow-up SAR there might be good. I don't think the $0 amount for a SAR, to be honest with you, the dollar amount's is the thing I look at the least, other than if I'm looking specifically at white collar, which most of our white collar crimes don't come from proactive SAR searches. They usually come from somebody calling us in saying I was taken, someone, embezzled money from me, or they are committing investment fraud. They're taking money from, poor, sick, elderly people, whatever they're doing. And that's usually how we get most of our white collar crimes. For the criminal stuff, I don't even look at the dollar amount. In fact, I try not to look at the dollar amount, because I feel like most agencies who do look at that do look at SARs, they're always concerned about the dollar amount. And so I think that area is already covered. Let me see. The only time the dollar amount matters is for white collar crime, because we do have a threshold. We don't always agree with that threshold, but we do have a threshold for opening a white collar case. Some of them, most public corruption, no, but investment frauds and stuff. Securities fraud, I think, is a little less, and each office has their own threshold. So I couldn't even tell you. In Asheville, our threshold's very low. I don't remember any case being turned away, but I know in Atlanta, the threshold was very high. I suspect in New York City or the larger cities, the threshold is a lot higher than smaller offices.
Is it helpful to have a case number at the bottom of your narrative so that you can reference back if you need to subpoena something?
Yes, very much so. Contact information, which is usually there anyway, I think, when you file it, but a case number, I think, would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Let's see. I'm not sure about this. More likely to have issues if related to a crime or high dollar amounts. I think that's me saying that I don't even look at dollar amounts. See, the nice thing working for the FBI is it doesn't matter what the dollar amount is. A few years ago, our AUSAs, the assistant U.S. district attorneys, those are the ones that agree to prosecute a case, was very interested in elder care fraud. And almost all of those, were very low dollar amounts. And we did open cases on that. Same thing with the human trafficking. And I bring those up because I feel like those sometimes get really overlooked. We try not to overlook them. For a related crime or cannabis in general. I think the few cases that we've looked at has been investment fraud related with the running of a hemp farm. We've seen, people trying to start up a hemp farm and, swindle people out of money to get the startup funds. That's something that we've seen. And another case that we saw was, again, where someone was, I guess they were laundering money or structuring it, both probably, in a way so that they could get stuff from the West Coast here, because their farm was not growing very well and they were trying to produce a product. But I would say investment fraud schemes is really where, at this point, the cannabis or the hemp farms is what we're seeing. Let's see. So what else would pique our interest for the FBI? So the interesting thing, the other thing about cannabis is that a lot of states, I mean, cannabis, I understand that hemp is different than marijuana. For me, it's all the same, because in the FBI, it's marijuana is illegal. But for us, I also have to say for us, it's hard to tell when something reaches that threshold. I know there's different levels of, is it TCH or THC? There you go, whatever it is, THC, I don't even know. There's different levels. It has to be a certain level for it to be illegal in some places. And that's just probably more work than we'll put in for that. But know that marijuana, even if it's legal in like North Carolina, let's say they make it legal here, the FBI, it's still a federal offense. I mean, it's still a crime in our books. Like, it's not, federally speaking, I couldn't smoke marijuana because I'm a federal employee and we're not allowed. You get the point. But mostly it's the financial part of it has been with the hemp farm or the cannabis farms. Cannabis or marijuana, to me, it's all the same. But it's the money exchanging that's going on. And most of it has been scams of scamming people out of money for their funds.
That's interesting. Yeah. So would you say that you would encourage, again, at no dollar thresh, people shouldn't be worried about that, because even if it's a white collar crime, you can aggregate that over a certain amount of time?
Yes, and so with the name matches, we have people that have multiple banking institutions. So if you only have one SAR at $0 amount, there might be another bank, or there might be other banking institutions that have SARs filed as well, and then we can show that there's a history of fraud. There was a case we looked at a few years ago that I found SARs all the way back to the 90s, and it was one different fraud after the other with this guy, and it started with mortgage fraud, and then it became securities fraud, and then investment fraud, and we could kind of watch the history of the guys. So, and again, I don't remember any of the dollar amounts for that. So I would say even if it's $0 amount, if you think it's important, file it, really.
So is it a certain time frame that you would aggregate them over, or is it just whenever?
So again, in the FBI, there's like statutes of limitations, and each white collar crime, specifically white collar, well, all the crimes actually have a statute of limitations. So I don't know what they are off the top of my head because I'm not an agent, but let's say securities fraud has a 10-year limitation. So if there's a SAR we find 20 years ago, we can't really indict somebody on that information, but it's good for us to see the history. And I think sometimes you can pull that into prosecution. Or the sentencing phase or whatever. It's valuable for us to see it, even if it's beyond the statute of limitations.
So if you end up finding SARs that you would like an institution to continue to file on because it's maybe not hitting some type of threshold or timing for you guys, is it okay for us to request a letter from you guys to keep it open? Was that something that you guys actually issue? We've always heard that's a thing, but
you know, I've not heard of the issuing. I've heard of it being discussed. I've never heard of a letter being drafted for it, but I have heard of us. I've heard agents talk about let's see if they'll keep it open. Whether they did that with a letter or an email or a phone call, I don't know, to keep an account open. So I have heard that.
Okay. Yeah, it becomes a little fuzzy for us with our regulators if we keep an account open that we really feel strongly somebody is committing a financial crime. It's almost like we're aiding and then continuing it.
Understood.
You know, if we keep it open. So
yeah, I would say if you haven't heard from anybody, then close it. Like, do what you have to do. I would think if we were looking at it, we would reach out to you specifically about it and you know, figure out what we need to do to keep the account open, if it was even important to keep it open. Most of the time, I think the documentation would be enough and you wouldn't have to keep the account open.
Do you think at any point in the future of the FBI or law enforcement in general that we'll ever get real good, any type of feedback or dispositioning on our SARs?
The only time, see, the way, unfortunately, the Bureau is not allowed to provide information, but if your individual's arrested and that, you'll see it in the news. And I hate saying that because I really hate that we can't provide stuff back, but we're really not.
I understand.
So, and it's sad. I mean, if you keep in contact with the agent and just keep providing them information, if there's a case, if we have a case on it, I still don't think they'd give you anything. But maybe you'll know that there's a case other than that, that it's not been closed if they're still accepting information.
Yeah. So. All right, I think that may be it for our questions for today. Unless we want to give it another 30 seconds here to get some last questions in. In the interim, we really appreciate you coming by, Stacy, and doing
absolutely.
this for us. We know at RiskScout it's really important not only to, our mission is helping financial institutions be able to bank underbanked people, and sometimes that's considered higher risk.
Mm-hmm.
And we understand it's important that there's always going to be good actors and bad actors, regardless whether they're been deemed as a high risk business or not. So it's really important for us to do these type of sessions with you guys to help our institutions really be able to, make your jobs easier so you can really hone in on the ones that matter and ones that don't. And there's no point if we're filing just to file with no meaning, no occupation, none of that stuff. It's just garbage in, garbage out. So.
Right. I always tell people I work with that there's a lot of information in SARs that benefit our cases, and that I think we underutilize our review of SARs, and that we need to be a little more proactive. And I routinely, unfortunately every like 2 years, I go through the SARs for the last 2 years and see if I pick up on anything. I would love to see the Bureau do that more often. It's just difficult when we have such limited resources and we have priorities such as ISIS and recently the domestic terrorism upkick or other things. It's very hard to be that proactive. But I try to do it, but I don't know that it's I do think there's some proactive looking for like terrorist SARs related to terrorism, but as a whole, the Bureau, it's hard to be proactive. So reach out if you have anything that's really significant. So, and you have my number on the screen. So if someone has questions, if this is over and you have further questions, you can reach out to me. I really enjoy going through SARs because I think it's really beneficial for us. So I'm happy to answer any questions, even if it's down the road. So keep my number.
Sounds good. Thank you, Stacy. We appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And should you have any questions, just please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks.